Hello, and thank you for watching the Marquette County Conservation District Wildflower webinar. This is a guide on how to pick out native plants, where to plant them, and what to do to maintain them.
If you're wondering how to use this guide, here are a few tips. Number 1, take stock of your yard. Take a look around and see what's already growing. Are your plants native or non-native or maybe even invasive? What are the planting conditions of your yard? Do you have super sunny spots or shady spots? Be sure to take note of different times of day to see where the shade comes into your yard. Do you have wet spots or dry spots? These are all good notes to take of your yard, and they'll help you select which plants to choose for your garden. Also, what kind of soil prep is needed? Have you done a soil test before or added any soil amendments for previous gardens? Step 2 is to find the right plants for your unique garden space. In this guide, you'll find different lists of plants that are designed for pollinators, shady spots, dry soils, medium soils, and wet soils. So selecting plants off of the right list for your yard will set you up for success. And finally, do your part in the fight against invasive species. Never purchase or plant invasive species, and if you think you might have some invasive species already growing in your yard, be sure to contact the Cooperative Invasive Species Management Area Coordinator in your area for a free consultation.
For some site prep tips and things to consider when choosing your planting location, you need to think about the following. Do you need to kill the existing vegetation? I know when we're thinking about planting gardens, we're not necessarily thinking about killing plants, but that actually may be part of the site prep process. Do you need to do any tilling or suppression of vegetation? Do you need to remove turf grass? Things don't like to grow very well through our typical lawn grass, so you may have to do some turf grass removal. If there are invasive species present, have you identified them and come up with a management plan to ensure they will not encroach on your new native plantings? Fertilizer. Do you need to fertilize? You might need some compost or some other fertilization resource. And you may need to be aware of water access and water needs. Is it wet? Is it just seasonally wet and will dry out through the summer? Or will it stay dry all year round?
When considering the design of your garden, there's a few things to keep in mind. First of all, be aware of the size of mature plants. You don't want to plant the seedlings or immature plants that you buy too close together. When they grow, they might overcrowd each other, and you'll have to end up thinning them out or relocating them. Another tip is to layer heights and colors for the best visual effect. Planting flowers with different colors next to each other can have a, a visual appeal for your garden. In border gardens, such as along a building or a house or a fence line, something like that, um, it's a good idea to place taller plants in the back of the garden, like along the wall or along the fence, and then shorter plants in front. This will create sort of a staircase effect. But in open gardens, you could use tall plants in the middle and plant shorter plants around it. The taller plants would serve as a focal point in this case.
To jump into native plantings, we're going to start with planting for pollinators. The goal of a lot of native plantings is to attract bees, butterflies, and birds as our native pollinator species. Honestly, take your pick. Almost any flowering plant is good for pollinators. Planting a pollinator patch can also attract beneficial insects that maybe aren't pollinators, but have co-evolved with the pollinators to be beneficial garden insects. Good bugs plus pollination equals a healthy, thriving garden. Also, don't confuse invasives as good pollinators. There's many non-native plants that are invasive that have flowers on them that will attract your pollinator friends, but maybe aren't providing the same nutrients and benefits that our native pollinator species would. In this slide, we've broken out some plants that are beneficial for pollinators, and we've broken them out based on height only. You'll see in some of these lists, based on their height, there will be variations between sunlight levels and moisture levels, but it's a good starting point when planning out a pollinator garden. Next, we'll consider some plants for the shade.
This list of shade-tolerant plants is designed to help you make the most of woodlines and other shady spots in your area. If you've got a shady yard, There's no need to worry. You can still have plenty of colorful flowering plants. You don't have to just plant hostas. If you're wondering if you have shade in your area, look for the edges. Those are usually the shady spots. So it could be the edge of a tree line or even the edge of a building that would cast shade, um, or under trees. So here is our list of shade-tolerant plants, again broken down by height. We have short, medium, and tall plant options for you.
When looking at shady spots, ground covers can be a very easy option, but be cautious. A lot of common ground covers sold in your local garden center are actually slightly invasive, or at least they're not native. Examples like Vinca vine and creeping Charlie can easily push out desirable native shade plants. A lot of times those are where specialized species exist. Native wild geranium would be a really excellent alternate choice. It has good ground cover, exists in shade, provides nice flowers, and will benefit native pollinating species.
This next list is for planting in dry and sandy soil conditions. If your yard has dry or sandy soils, that's really common in the UP, especially living close to Lake Superior. The beach sand gets into a lot of places in a lot of yards. It's important to note that pure sand, such as the actual beach, is not able to support dry living plants, but a sandy, coarse, and gritty texture is a-okay. And here's our list that are specific for dry and sandy soil types, again broken down by short, medium, and tall plant heights.
Native species actually thrive in these dry, sandy conditions, and lots of native species can take advantage of the poor soils in those dry, sandy sites. Rather than having non-native invaders, native plant species will actually do better. They improve soil with the moisture retention and erosion control with their root systems.
This next list is for planting from medium soil types. And by medium, we mean not too dry or not too wet. So it's that sort of in-between soil type that is a catch-all for a lot of different soils. Most of our wildflowers and grasses are compatible in medium soil types. And here is our list. You can see it's a long one because most of our wildflowers will do just fine in medium soils. And again, they're broken down by heights. Next, we're going to give you a list for planting in wet and heavy soils. These plants like soggy conditions. They like to have their roots wet. That's what we mean by we say wet feet lovers. Planting water-loving plants can help soggy areas stay in place and possibly even improve drainage in some cases. It's important to pay attention to natural slopes in your space. The bottom of a slope will naturally be wetter than higher ground when selecting where to plant your garden. And here's our list of wet and soggy soil loving plants.
By planting with native plants in your wet soil space, you're actually contributing to native wetland habitat. This could potentially increase the nesting for wetland bird species and promote wetland functions in your area. There are many benefits to native wetland plants. Invasive wetland plants, such as the non-native Phragmites pictured at the right here, degrade that migratory bird habitat and crowd out other species that are used for food and shelter by these wildlife creatures. We do have native Phragmites, and this is a great picture to show the juxtaposition between the two. On the right, the native Phragmites is lower growing and more spaced out and will leave room for other beneficial plants. Whereas on the left-hand side, the invasive Phragmites is much taller, much denser, and does not leave room for any other species. By planting native species, you're helping to stop the spread of invasive species. My favorite quote that I heard was, "If you can, plant native. If not, at least don't plant invasive." When you plant with native plants, you're helping to contribute to healthy native ecosystems, and you're feeding native pollinator species better than if you were planting with non-natives. Native plants also promote soil health, assist in erosion control, and sequester more environmental pollutants. With this graphic, you can see that the non-native plants on the left have much shallower root systems than the native plants on the right. These root systems go deeper into the soil, allowing more uptake of pollutants, help with erosion control by going further and deeper into the soil for stabilization, and those roots will add more nutrients and more moisture levels deeper into the soil gradient. As an example of a non-native species that's actually still for sale in most garden centers, Japanese barberry is one of those contenders. It gets very popular in landscape design, as you can see in this middle photograph, and can be kept in place with regular trimming and care and maintenance. However, birds often eat the berries, and they go disperse those berries into the woods. And then, as you can see in the right, it causes a huge problem for forested understories. This also can be a human health hazard, as it's been found that barberry out in natural ecosystems like this harbors tick populations, and it can actually help tick populations thrive and increase. More ticks is more chance for disease-carrying ticks. As an example of some non-native water plants that are still for sale in garden centers, examples include water lettuce and water hyacinth. These are on the Michigan Invasive Species Watch List, but can still be found at garden centers as floating aquatic additions to garden and water gardens. It readily invades waterways if it gets out of your pond. You can simply ask for other native water planting options, or if you really do want these plants, how to properly keep them and then properly dispose of them when you're done enjoying them for the season so they won't become a new invader. Now that you've gone through our native planting guide, it's time to get planting. If you have any questions or concerns, please call the staff at the Marquette County Conservation District. We're happy to assist you in questions on what to plant, where to plant, how to source native plants, and also some advice and management options when it comes to invasive species.